Did it. It's Morning Brew. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the revival of Morning Brew. I'm your host, Bruna, aka Mystic Brew. If you're new here, this is an old IGTV series that I used to do back in 2019 that I am now reviving here on YouTube, where I answer your questions over a cup of coffee. If you don't already have your beverage in hand, feel free to pause now and go grab something. Whatever you like. I'm not judging, but we're going to be here for a bit. For those of you who are here and know what we're about, let's take a sip. What's in your cup? Oh, I think I put a little too much vanilla. If you know about Morning Brew, then you can also tell that we have upped production here with this little mic. I hope you enjoy it. Now, if you don't know what is going on right now, you may wonder, why do I care what you have to say about anything? That's a valid question. Sometimes I ask myself the same thing. And yet here we are. My entire life, I have been that person that people have asked for advice or for guidance or for clarity. Maybe it's because I'm a 5-1 projector in human design. Maybe it's because I just have that sort of aura. I don't know. But it's happened my entire life. So we turned it into a series. Now, to give myself some credit, I do have an extensive background of many plot twists and detours that have allowed me to acquire quite the toolbox when it comes to my skills. I was a psych major that switched to journalism. I worked in entertainment industry for over 10 years, and at the same time, I started my own dating blog called The Problem with Dating, which also ran for 10 years. Through that blog, which garnered 500,000 users globally, where we all just basically talk shit about the dating atmosphere nowadays, I was also able to become a dating columnist for Playboy and release my first book, Let That Shit Go, A Journey to Forgiveness, Healing, and Understanding Love on Amazon. I was also then thrown another curveball when I quit my corporate job and all of that stability that earth signs love, because I'm a triple earth sign, to go for the freelance world. And let me tell you, um, it's still hard. I wish I had the equation, the mathematical formula, something to tell you that I found my stride and it was smooth sailing, and I don't. I'm still figuring it out, and it's been almost 10 years, but somehow, some way, I'm still surviving. And what I will say is the freedom and liberation I experienced after leaving my corporate job, which we're going to talk about a little bit because it's actually part of one of the questions for today. It's something that's really hard to go back to once you've experienced owning your time. But it does require a lot of discipline. It requires a lot of consistency. And you want to talk about self-worth work? Try being a freelancer. Nothing will bust your ass more than realizing that all of your duties, all of your bills, all of the adult things that you need, it's on you now. There's no consistent paycheck. There's no one no, it's on you. It's deep, it's layered. Maybe we'll get into it even more in another series. But as for now, we're going to dive into the questions that we have. If you have questions that you would like to submit for another episode, you can do so in the link below. Let's get started. I forgot to mention that part of my plot twist journey was then in 2019, I started dabbling into spirituality, hence Mystic Brew. Some of you may know that if you follow me on other platforms. That became a very crazy journey that really hit a point in 2020. You may understand what I'm saying because I feel like a lot of us hit this point in 2020 during the panini where we were like, oh shit, here we go. This is an initiation. And for me, it was all about shadow work. So that's the work that I now do with people. I like to help people recognize their shadow patterns in their unconscious, bringing it back to that original psych major so that you can understand what's going on behind the scenes. I've realized that throughout my trajectory, I've been answering one question, and that was, what's the story? Whether it was psychology, journalism, or spirituality, it was always coming back to that question, what's the story? And it started with me. I got some shit. If you read my book, you know. And at some point, you got to realize I'm the common denominator here, and I need to figure out what the fuck I'm doing that is creating this same experience over and over and over again. So that's what I did. And I thought I was done. chuckles and naivete. And then I had a very impactful relationship that nearly left me for dead. And I went into the depths of my underworld, and that was my shadow initiation. And so now, whether it's through guidance calls or astrology readings or tarot readings, I like to look at these divination tools as a compass to help me figure out your shadow. With astrology, especially, I love doing those astrology readings because then I see a story that's being weaved and I get to see the lore. I see the origin story of you and I help you connect the dots. And so that way, when you gain awareness of what's going on behind the scenes that you may not realize is actually affecting and running your life, then you have more control because now you have the power of choice. Sometimes what we don't realize is when we do things unconsciously, we don't think that we can make a choice, that we can do things differently. But that's because you're stuck on autopilot. And so much of our life is run by our unconscious mind. So if you don't know what the story is in there, that then leads to you showing up in your life in a very specific way to corroborate that story, then you realize you have no power over your life. So that's the gist. And I bring that up because our first question has to do with astrology. Zoe asks, I have a Scorpio stellium, including moon and black moon Lilith. A stellium in astrology is when you have 3 or more planets in one sign. It's a heightened, concentrated energy. However, my north node is in Leo and I have a Libra rising. I have a really difficult time balancing my love of people and community with the need to brood over emotions and be intense. I know all about intensity. Also, oftentimes when I have emotions like anger that feel uncomfortable, I don't know the right approach to deal with it on the Scorpio level. Thanks so much for all you do. Love you. Aw, thank you. Love you back. All right, let me just take a sip of my fuel. And let's get into it. Now, when it comes to astrology questions, and this is across the board and for you, Zoe, as you know, because I know you follow me on other platforms and you've seen me do this, take what resonates, leave the rest. I intuitively interpret what I'm getting based on part of the foundational information of astrology that I've learned over the years, and also the intuitive insights that I'm getting from what I'm seeing. So, right now, I'm going to try to draft your chart in my mind's eye and see what's playing together. Obviously, I would get a clearer depiction of what's going on if I saw your whole chart. And if you want to book a service, you or anyone watching, the link is below, mysticbrew.com. Okay. Now you say you have a Scorpio stellium with your moon and your black moon Lilith, and you're a Libra rising. So if you're a Libra rising, that means Libra rules your first house. We're going to do whole sign here just so we can have a clear picture. If Libra rules your first house, that means Aries rules your 7th house. And if Libra rules your first house, that means Scorpio rules your 2nd house of material resources, work, and worth. I always like to remind people it's not just net worth, it's self-worth, because as I mentioned earlier, they're connected. So you have your stellium Scorpio energy in the 2nd house, including your moon and your black moon Lilith. Let's start there. Now, you may have heard me talk about this before, a Hades moon marker. A Hades moon marker is when you have a Scorpio moon, your moon in the 8th house, or any harsh aspects, oppositions, conjunctions, or squares between Pluto and your moon. A Hades moon marker is fascinating to me, and I love when I see it in a chart because I also have it in my chart. I know it sounds a little scary, and it's intense, I'm not going to lie, but since you're already familiar with intensity, that's okay. When you have a Hades moon marker, it's usually an indicator that there is a deep maternal wound that is moving through your lineage. So it's not just about you and mom, it's you and mom, mom and her mom, her mom and her mom, and however far back it goes. Now, again, if I were able to see your whole chart, I might be able to gain more insight on what this deep maternal wound is. But with it being in your 2nd house, that already tells me that there's something about your identity when it comes to worthiness. Perhaps your mother, and again, don't make it fit if this isn't true for you. Perhaps your mother, well, not perhaps, I know your mother influenced your sense of worthiness. Now, whether that was in a good way or a bad way, I don't know. With a Hades moon marker, it can usually point to a mother who is either emotionally suffocating or absent in some way. There is a sense of abandonment. Either way, this is meant to trigger you so that you do the shadow work. Hades moon marker people love to dive into the shadows, whether they realize it or not. And that's by design, it's on purpose. You're meant to dive into the shadows of yourself, because when you do that for yourself, you're also doing it for everyone that came before you. Not in a way of becoming responsible for their work, but in a way of when you heal yourself, you inevitably affect all the energy connected to you. So there is something about mom here that has to do with your sense of worthiness. Perhaps you equate your net worth to your self worth. Perhaps that's been a struggle for you when it comes to really feeling fulfilled and secure within yourself. Now, again, with Black Moon Lilith here as well, you may attribute money or financial means to a sense of power. There's a lot of power here for you. And I think intuitively, you're afraid of it. I think you're afraid of what you are able to harness, because I think and this happens, when you really start to, touch into that dark feminine or your darkness, because darkness is feminine energy, not because it's bad, because it's not easily accessible. Feminine energy is what's under the current, not the sun, not that what's out and easy to ascertain. Either way, I think there's a level of your power that frightens you. And that's part of this journey for you. When you feel those brooding, intense emotions, there's really powerful information that's also coming up for you. And again, you're meant to find that balance. Now, with your Libra rising, yes, Libra at its optimum energy, and when it's balanced, it's all about balance. It's about harmony. It's also about justice. So I wouldn't be surprised if you had moments in your life too, where when you felt a sense of injustice, that Scorpio energy just came all the way up, and you were like, "Ooh, I don't know what to do with this." And you mentioned the anger. I wouldn't be surprised as well if your anger felt like 1,000, like 0 to 100 really quick. And that can feel really frightening, especially if you aren't raised to understand and know how to hold anger. Anger is a very powerful experience because it's bringing a lot of information. Oftentimes, when we feel anger, it's our energy, our essence, our body, our heart telling us a boundary has been crossed. There's a violation that's happening. Something is going on here that is crossing a value of yours. And so it can be hard when you feel that much intensity and you don't know how to harness it within your body and how to then express it in a healthy way that doesn't harm you or other people, what to do with it. Now, you mentioned your North Node in Leo, which means your South Node is in Aquarius. This, just as a side note, this Pluto transit in Aquarius for the next 20 years is going to be huge for you, because already you're telling me you have a lot of fixed placements. And so Pluto moving through Aquarius is not only going to affect your South Node, but it's going to affect your Leo North Node. It's going to affect all those Scorpio placements we just talked about. And there's something else in there if it's a stellium that I don't know about. And also, if you have any Taurus placements, it's going to affect that as well. Obviously, Aquarius the most, because that's what it's moving through. And then Leo, because that's the opposition. And then Taurus and Scorpio, because those are the squares. So if you don't understand anything I'm saying, that's okay. I also have an Astro Basics ebook. If you want to learn more, it's available on my website. Now, your Aquarius North Node, or I'm sorry, your Aquarius South Node tells me that you've already mastered that energy of collective activism, of allowing yourself to be unconventional, innovative, very quirky in a way where you go against the grain in a certain way. Now, with this Leo North Node, you're being called to what might feel really uncomfortable, which is allowing the spotlight to be on you. Now, you still have that Aquarius South Node energy, but you're meant to like embody in a way where you are not afraid to share it with the world. That they're sister signs, and with your nodes, they're always sister signs, and the entire wheel are full of sister signs, and they represent each side of the spectrum because they each help each other find balance in the middle. So, for a Leo Aquarius nodal axis, Leo helps Aquarius feel confident enough to be seen for all that they are. Meanwhile, Aquarius reminds Leo it's not just about you. And so they help each other in that way. And that's the access that you're finding balance in right now. Now, your North Node in Leo, if I am not mistaken, would be your 11th house of greater networks, also friendship groups. So I wouldn't be surprised if you may have had some experiences with your friendship groups or social networks where when you do get attention, you're kind of like, oh, I don't know. Or you may have experienced envy, jealousy. Again, you're going to have some hurdles when it comes to your North Node because you really have to work through any shadow blocks that are preventing you from showing up in that place. And so people will be sent to trigger you so that you can become aware of whatever is hiding in the unconscious that's preventing you from showing up in that energy. Everyone is playing a role here. That's all it is. Yeah, balancing your love of people and community and the need to brood over emotions and be intense, they can both live harmoniously. But again, as I always say, I've talked about this for years. When we are going through this journey, the life journey, you are going to experience multiple pendulum swings. And what that means is you have, again, I always say this, everything lives on a spectrum, which means that you're going to be swinging from one extreme to the next until you're able to find that balanced sweet spot in the middle. And that's not because you're doing anything wrong or because you're too extreme or you're failing or any, no. You can't possibly know what that midpoint is if you don't know your limits. And so that's just the universe showing you your limits. Okay, I know I can be broody. I know I can be intense. I know I can be emotional. And I know that I have a love for community. I have a love for people. So then the question is, how can I harness this energy in a way that promotes my values and aligns with what it is that I know I want to do here and who I am? Sorry if when I keep touching the mic by accident. So if it's making a weird sound, I apologize. So again, it's just about understanding more of that Scorpio energy so that you know how to harness it. I wouldn't be surprised if you're already doing shadow work, but if you need extra assistance, I have my Deconstructing Shadow Work ebook. It's $10. It's available on my site. And also go down the rabbit hole. Look up Black Moon Lilith Scorpio in the second house. See what resonates with you. I love research. And when you're able to gain information, you can begin to see how things are playing out. And then you become aware of it. So if you do participate in any unconscious behavior, there's going to be a moment where you're like, oh shit, I'm doing it. And that's when things start to unravel and you can choose differently. But again, that Scorpio energy has a lot of power for you, especially when it comes to transformation and healing, not just yourself, but something that's been a cycle for your maternal lineage. I don't know if you have the type of relationship where you can talk to your mom about things like this, but she may have some insight for you. And if there is any sort of dissonance or conflict with mom, maybe become curious and see what she is projecting from her own experience onto you, because again, there's a cycle happening and it's unconscious. So I hope that helps. Thank you for your question. The next question from Honey: how do you stay firm on boundaries without feeling guilty? I would love to know if anyone has the answer. Boundaries have been quite a lesson for me. I don't know. I think I've had to just sit with the guilt and then start doing a self-coaching. So I am a certified coach, and I got my coaching certification back in 2018. And as with every healing certification I've gotten, whether it was Reiki, whether it was coaching, whatever, there is an initiation that happens and my own healing journey that happens throughout that experience so that I'm able to show up for others in a way that's grounded and embodied. Boundaries turned out to be a very weak and blind spot for me. Now, that's due to many different things. One, cultural. I'm Lebanese, and within our culture, people don't like saying no, they don't like hearing no, and they take things very personally. It is a very community centered culture, which I love. If you go to Lebanon, it doesn't matter if it's a stranger on the street, they have your back. You need food, they'll feed you. You need something to drink, they'll give it to you. You need a place to just sit down and they'll invite you in. That's something I love about where I come from. And again, the pendulum swing, on the other end of it, it can become a lot because there is an unconscious sense of entitlement to people's time and energy. And so anyone who's an immigrant or first generation, I'm an immigrant. You know what I'm talking about when you start setting limits, especially with family, which sometimes is the hardest. And it can seem like you're selfish, you're self serving, you don't care about anybody. What is this? What is this American thing you're doing? And it's just a matter of recognizing I love you. I love this relationship. I want to sustain it. And at the pace we're going and with what's being asked of me, I already know I'm not going to be able to do that. So again, I think sometimes with boundaries, confirmation burp coming. Oh my God. Excuse me, we're releasing. We are activating the throat chakra. I think sometimes it's really important to remember that when it comes to relationships and boundaries, a boundary is not get away from me. A boundary is I value this and I want to make sure it stands the test of time. And in order for me to do that, I need to make you aware of what I need to feel safe. If you are disrespecting my time, my energy, what I need to be able to show up for you in the way that I do, then it's not going to work. And again, what I've noticed tends to happen is it's two very different conversations happening. You're saying, I love you, I want this to work, yada, yada, what I just said. The other person, all they're hearing is, you hate me, you don't want to be around me, you don't want to help me, you don't want to invest in me, you don't want to do this, you're trying to create distance. That's not what it is. I do want to be mindful in noting that I think we are still learning collectively how to actually set boundaries, because I think sometimes we just get into a mode of being really rigid and being like, well, if you don't do this, then I'm not going to do this. And it's like, well, that's not it either, because then you're just asking someone to change instead of acknowledging this is what I need. And so this is how I will move forward. So there's lots of other people who are much more qualified to give you a formula or insight on how to set healthy boundaries. What I will say about the guilt is it's always about a check in. Why am I feeling guilty? Is it because I'm putting myself first in a situation that I'm not used to doing that in? Is it because there are old beliefs or assumptions that are coming up? Am I afraid about how they're feeling and now I'm taking responsibility of their emotions and trying to manage other people's emotions? Because this is especially hard if you're a people pleaser. You learned that in order to be likable, to be lovable, to survive, you got to show up for people in a specific way. But again, that's a mask. And you can only wear a mask for so long. And when you wear a mask, you actually relinquish people's ability to cultivate intimacy with you, because they're not actually dealing with you. They're dealing with a version of yourself that you have perfectly put together and executed in order to present yourself. It's a performance. Is that the relationship you actually want? Probably not. I'm going to guess no. You want someone who loves you for you. And that's why those relationships become depleting, because you realize I'm not even showing up as my true self. It's not even about them. You can't always point the finger at other people. You got to sometimes realize, okay, well, my responsibility is to show up authentically and honestly. Am I doing that? Even when you think, but I'm showing up for them and I'm being a good friend, I'm being a good daughter, I'm being a good, yeah, but you're also not being true to your needs. And people can't meet you where you are if they don't know where that is. And a lot of times we make it worse in our head. Not saying that sometimes we don't get that backlash that we fear, but usually Because we're already afraid, we think of the worst scenario and then we talk ourselves out of doing it. I have definitely had experiences where I realized, oh, this person's just not aligned with me. And I've also had experiences where I realized it was all in my head. And in fact, the people who truly love and care about you want to know this. This is valuable information for them because they love and care about you. They don't want you out here depleted and drained. They don't want you going against your needs. They don't want you doing anything other than being yourself. And they want to show up and support you in whatever way that you need. And they want to also bring in whatever they need to bring in to help this relationship move forward. So it's going to be touch and go. But again, the guilt is natural and normal when it comes to setting limits for the first time, especially with people you really care about. Now, as far as whether it's something else, I can't tell you that. That's going to be your discernment. And again, sometimes when we start placing boundaries for the first time, we tend to go at it really rigid. Again, the pendulum swing. If we were super like, no boundaries, everything's fine, just take all my time, whatever. And then we realize, oh, this isn't going to work. We swing. And then we go to very rigid boundaries. That's not going to work either. But again, it's recognizing and knowing that people who love you understand and they'll give you the room to figure out the balance. And what I've also noticed can be really helpful is being transparent about that. Hey, I'm trying to learn how to set boundaries in my relationships because I've noticed that I get really exhausted and overwhelmed and then I can't even show up, or I start feeling like I don't even want to show up because I'm afraid of being put in a situation that I don't want to be in, and I don't want to do that because it's going to affect our relationship. So I'm trying to learn how to do this. I'm going to mess up because I'm not sure how. So I appreciate your patience and understanding as I navigate this. And please know, this isn't about not wanting to spend more time with you or show up for you or whatever it is. It's just trying to figure out how I can better utilize my energy and time so I can show up for you. If they got a problem with that, that's probably not your person. So, thank you, honey, for your question. All right, last question from Ceci. It's hard to picture you as a regular employee once upon a time. What was the moment or event when you knew you were going to lean on the universe to provide for your basic needs instead of an employer? I don't think I've even shared this story publicly, but let's get into it. We're going to spill the proverbial tea or coffee, if you will. So as I mentioned earlier, I worked for entertainment news for nearly 10 years. I worked for E! Online, and this was straight out of college. It was my dream job. Like I I told everybody when I was in college, I'm going to work for E. I'm going to be on the red carpet. I'm going to be the next Juliana Rancic or Ryan Seacrest. Da, da, da. I was so like delulu that I was like, oh, they're going to change it from E to B. Like, what do you mean? And the Delulu worked because I was an intern and then they hired me right out of college. They let me know a month before graduation that they'd been holding a position for me for a couple months, which I was like, what? And I started literally a week after graduation and I was living my best life. 23 years old, salary, working for this huge company that I had always said I wanted to work for in pop culture, in entertainment news. I could go on, but you get the gist. I always tell people, because I love to do metaphors and analogies to help illustrate the energy of a situation. I always tell people that experience for me was like being the loner outcast girl with a crush on the super popular stud, right? And in my mind, it's like, yeah, I'm doodling your name on my binder, but do I actually think I have a shot with you? No, like, I don't know, but not really. And then all of a sudden, that opportunity arises, and you realize, oh shit, I actually have a chance to be with this person. Amazing. Now, because it was a fantasy, it was held up on a pedestal. And so what happened was, similar to some relationships, the reality of it set in. And suddenly, this wasn't the stud from a distance who I could make up what that life would be like. I'm living it now. And when I was living it, over time, I started to see, huh, this may not be as aligned as I thought it would be for me. So I had a lot of moments throughout that journey where I was like, I don't know if this is going to be long term. But again, I value stability and security so much. Like it literally affects my well being, which is why almost this last decade since I left has been a lot on my mental health and my emotional health. The big sort of turning point for me happened, I want to say like 6 years in. I had been thinking about moving on for a bit, and there's multiple reasons which I won't get into, but um, it hit a pinnacle. It hit a tower moment, multiple towers at once. Because as I've always said, and you may have heard, if you don't make the move, the universe will do it for you. And if you leave it up to the universe to do it, it's not always going to be comfortable. And so I hit a point where I had to have 2 emergency surgeries because of a recurring cyst that I had throughout my life. It was an internal cyst near my tailbone, root chakra, stability, security, the material world. But during all of this, it started to come up to the surface and it was about to burst, and I was in so much pain. I, within 24 hours, was called into surgery. I was scheduled the day of my surgery to run the entire website by myself that evening. This was not a rare thing. I would run the website by myself multiple times. And I'm talking a website that has 30 million users daily. A website that I am now in charge of finding the stories, writing the stories, editing, making sure everything is good, publishing the stories, changing the widgets, doing the ticker, doing the blast, putting it on social, connecting with the news desk, with the reporters, getting like I'm doing a whole team's worth of jobs by myself. No one's on, no one's there. Obviously, I didn't expect to have this surgery. So I hit up my boss. And right after I got off the phone with the nurse, I didn't even know if it was covered by my insurance. I had no idea what was going on. My parents were not here. I had to have my coworker drive me to the hospital and drop me off because they said I wouldn't be able to drive. And they told me, you're going to feel super drunk after, because they had to put me under. I remember calling my boss and saying, hey, I didn't understand the severity of this. I just got off the phone with the nurses. They told me this is what it is. I don't think I could work tonight. And she said, well, if I would have known that sooner, I could have scheduled someone else, but I can't do anything about that now. That's not even the big thing. I go to surgery. I get dropped off. I do surgery. I wake up. I'm literally gown, cap, like IVs in my hand. I don't know if I still have the photo, but I get a text from the woman who was working right before me and would sign off and hand it over to me. Hey, do you know when you're going to be signing on? I send her this photo. Oh my gosh. Well, just let me know when you get home. It was in that moment that I realized, despite all of the time and effort that I put into this company, despite all the ideas that I give, all the jobs above my pay grade that I would work, all the times I handled shit by myself, all the times that because I was one of the youngest people there, I was always pumping into this company just to get this response. That's when I realized, oh, I'm disposable, I'm replaceable, I'm just part of the machine. They don't see me as a human being. I worked that night, high off whatever shit that they gave me to do this surgery. I was at my desk Monday morning with a donut to sit on and my antibiotics. And I went into my boss's office and I started crying. And she said she didn't realize the severity of it. And I'm just like, I told you. That's when I knew I needed to start figuring out my exit plan. And that was difficult because I knew that anywhere else I went, not to sound egotistical, but would have kind of been a downgrade if I was to stick to entertainment news. It took me about a year to have a plan to save up enough money as cushion. And literally a year later, the cyst comes back. I have to get another surgery. I go to a different surgeon to do a different procedure where I would have to naturally heal, which means 6 weeks of healing. Couldn't walk, couldn't lay down, couldn't drive, couldn't do shit. Suffice to say, my root chakra was exposing and purging every fear of mine. I was losing all sense of stability and security. I was not feeling safe. In every sense of the word, mentally, emotionally, physically, all of these different things were happening at the same time. And I just couldn't believe it. But I knew I deserve more than this, and I have more to contribute to the world, and I deserve to be treated better, and I deserve to be recognized for what I have to offer and to be treated like a human being. And so the day I got back from my leave, my medical leave, I printed my resignation letter, and it was no surprise. And my send off was lukewarm. After nearly 10 years of investing into this company, I thought they would have cared a little more, but I guess it didn't matter. Um, and so, yeah, that's when I realized, and I just started freelancing. And I was like, I guess I just got to figure it out because it left such a bad taste in my mouth when it came to corporate culture that I was like, I'm never working for anyone else again because I know at the very least I would treat myself better than the way that they treated me. But that has its own hurdles and challenges, and it's because I am undiagnosed, but perhaps have ADHD among other things. It's really hard for me to focus and for me to show up in a way where I'm pumping. And again, as a projector, it's not within my nature. So it's been challenging and yet has stretched me in ways I could never imagine and has required me to surrender to the universe in ways that have been very uncomfortable. But here I am, and we persevere, and I still have so much faith in God's plan for me as long as I keep showing up, which I will do because I put too much blood, sweat, and tears into the game to give up now. And so we'll see. But that was a huge turning point for me. And it was a huge initiation as well to remember that I am safe, I am protected. And sometimes where you depend on your safety and security isn't even necessary because it starts in here. And it's recognizing that that external validation is just a reflection of how you feel about yourself. And if I was to stay there, I was telling myself that I am disposable and that I am just a machine and that I am not worth more. And that's just not true. So, thank you for that question, Ceci. And that wraps up the first episode of the Morning Brew Revival. Thank you guys for sticking around. If you're still here watching, I really appreciate you sharing this space with me. I hope you've enjoyed it. And as I mentioned earlier, if you have any question at all that you would like to submit, you can do so through the Google form linked below, and it will be featured in a future episode of Morning Brew. One last sip. That was a little more than I anticipated. Thank you guys. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll see you soon.